All right, so this is the beginning of the second part of part one, which is a bit of a mouthful, but hopefully that all makes sense and I've explained it properly. I've obviously taken my head off the recording this time, which is the way that I wanted it. No, obviously for educational purposes, so that we can look through this artifact that I've got, which is a lesson plan, and obviously the learning theory that we'll be looking at to exemplify how my educational philosophy will work and why it can be sustainable is Bloom's taxonomy, which I'm about to go over now. All right, so without further ado, let's get started. So obviously Bloom's taxonomy is something that we've looked at before. I'm not going to go over it as specifically said in the unit guide. All right, so obviously we'll start at the top of the pyramid, regardless of what I'm going to go over each individual aspect of Bloom's anyway. So to produce new or original work, which is in the create part. So I think that my educational theory and philosophy will sort of underpin this area of new work and design, assembling and constructing and formulating and all those great words that come with creating, through the belief that all learners are different and all people are different. The student relationships with each other, which I've already described as one in all in, allows the students to also communicate with each other and design and construct knowledge of their own through the theories of others as well. And I think that that's really important to note. Evaluate, justify a stand or decision. So really in evaluate, what some students have a really difficult time writing things like essays because they don't really know how to argue and support and value opinions. And we had this example of the year 8s doing an essay when I was on practicum, and they had to do an argumentative essay, and they just didn't know how to do it. And upon reflection of that was that, and the deliberations that we had with other professionals within the school, were that the students just weren't really trusted with coming up with their own work during class, and therefore when they actually had to argue and sort of take a side and give value to something, they didn't quite know how to do it. So I feel like my educational philosophy really allows that, because we're allowing them to be people and to argue their points and judge things and select what they support and value certain things in their own life, which should shine through in their work as well. As we move to analyze, so draw connections among ideas. Now, differentiating and organizing ideas are super important to underpinning my educational philosophy, because we want to see differentiation and comparing and distinguishing as a positive, all positives. Now, we're allowing students to differentiate work because they're working with each other. They've got good relationships with each other. So therefore, they can differentiate themselves from others and realize that as a strong point, and to use their strengths to experiment and question other people's work in a respectful way so that they can benefit their own and that person as well. So analyzing and reflecting, that differentiation is a really important part of my educational philosophy. Then to apply. So applying is obviously using information in new situations. So therefore, with my philosophy, which obviously we've been over, but it's sort of one of those things that I really want things to be changing and to be driven by the students and to be new and fresh and all of that cool stuff that you sort of anticipate when you're going to go into teaching. Obviously, it's not all going to be like that, but new situations are something that they should be really common within a teaching philosophy like this. So therefore, using information in new situations will allow the students to execute, implement, and solve things because they're used to it. people are creatures of habit. So if they're used to it and they've done it before, they'll be able to apply their information in new situations because they're able to adapt. And adapt's been the main word there because they've had to adapt to so many different situations already. And then we move on to understand. So explaining ideas and concepts, which is obviously self-explanatory in this one because their student relationships are one in all. The classroom atmosphere is respect. So they respect each other's ideas. They can explain their ideas and concepts. They can classify what's important. They can discuss, they can explain, they can identify. And obviously, I'm using this in terms of students, can also come from the teacher as well. So for myself to explain ideas and concepts is to understand. And obviously, if I know the students well, I can identify them, I can locate their areas of interest, I can recognise the things that make them tick, so therefore I can explain it in different ways because my educational philosophy has set me up to know that all learners are different and know that I'll have to explain things in different ways so that the students can understand. And obviously we move on to remember, so recall facts and basic concepts. Hopefully with a great environment, and I really believe that the environment that I'm going to create as a teacher and the things that underpin my educational philosophy, remember it will roll off. Students will learn. It won't always be like this, but they will be able to remember and recall basic facts and concepts obviously in line with what they need to know in the curriculum. So they're the things that exemplify Bloom's taxonomy, and obviously they relate to other educational theories, which there is many that we've looked at, but we won't go into it. So we'll move on now, and I'll just explain my artifact while I find my notes here. So the artifact that I've chosen to bring into this part of the assignment is here, and it's a lesson plan from my most recent practicum. So obviously the learning outcomes here, it's not really the most important thing, but the learning outcomes, students will work together to develop outcomes relating to the local, state, federal strands of government, work in teams to develop knowledge, develop respect for each other. Students will be given the freedom to develop their own ways of presenting findings, and a main focus of the lesson from both a personal and professional point of view is its student engagement with each other, the content, and their own outcomes. So really student-driven, class-incorporated lesson. So basically, I've changed a lot of it to, so it's not incriminating anyone and not reflecting the school. So the first thing to do is to split the class up into groups. In a nutshell, I'll go over this quickly because we'll go over it in terms of DeBono's hats. Split the class up, give one group, so it'll be 3 groups, give one group local, one group state, one group federal government. 3 key things on the board: how does government work, what do they do on control, how do they make decisions, and then for the next half an hour, they'll gather this information and subsequently work as a team to come to conclusions for those questions on the board. So they are going away and doing their own research, which they have devices to do that. So in this particular class they did. After they've gathered that sort of information, the next phase of the lesson is to tell students that they've got something fun and creative to do. I need to get pumped about it, as I've said here. Sorry to the assignment marker that these are all small notes to myself. Students in their groups are coming up with a creative way to share their information. So write up suggestions like a presidential speech, role play, song, PowerPoint. Emphasize that obviously every group member has to be involved and ideas can't be anything inappropriate, which I've put a little bit here. Students deliver their presentations next, and then the last activity is a reflection. So in terms of DeBono's hat, so the white hat, which I won't go over, is the facts. So it's just the facts. So basically the research part of the assignment here that's just my email that's going on. The research part of our assignment here is the facts. So looking at the facts in terms of 1, 2, 3 key things on the board, and really, it's pretty self-explanatory, the white hat, I think, in the terms of this class, which is obviously made underpinning the main factors of my educational philosophy. Sorry about the click pen, I sometimes forget. So the yellow hat symbolises brightness and optimism. This should reflect my educational philosophy through the groups, because the students should respect each other in this environment and think each other can have a positive impact on their education. So each other's differences should act as a bright and sort of an optimistic way to look at their group. So hopefully with my theories and my philosophies underpinning this class, which they did underpin the production of this lesson plan, the students will look at each other when they get into the groups and not think negatively, but think positively. And that's where the yellow hat comes into it. So brightness and optimism. Okay, here we go. We've got, let's say, Jenny, who's a great academic. We've got Mark, who is out there, calls out a lot, does a few naughty things in class, but gee, he's going to be great for a role play. So they should look at each other in terms of positivity and not negativity. The black hat, devil's advocate. So the students will work together for this presentation, and hopefully, because they respect each other and they're in a respectful environment, and they know this because they're in my class, they will be able to critique each other's ideas for presentation. One group is bound to have someone who's a devil's advocate, who will say, no, that's too hard, no, that's too easy, no, that won't work, and things like that. So they can critique and play devil's advocate with each other, because they're working together, and that's the most important thing. The red hat, feelings, emotions, fears. The idea with this one that this will come also in the development of their presentation. The main fear that I found in this actual lesson was, I wrote up presidential speech, role play, song, and students automatically were communicating with each other. Let's not do a speech because I don't like public speaking. I have a fear of public speaking. Let's not do a song because I don't feel confident enough to get up and sing in front of the class, and things like that. So I think that's where a red hat comes into it, the real feelings and other parts. And emotions, sorry. So the green hat, creativity, possibilities, obviously endless in this. Creativity is one thing that really underpins my educational philosophy. It really underpins this lesson in particular. So the green hat should really shine through in what some of the students come up with. And you know what? It was absolutely fantastic what they came up with. One group came up with a Facebook page for, actually no, I think it was an Instagram for their local government, and had each of the things I'd written on the board, which were, yep, that's right, how does government work, what do they do, how do they make decisions, and they had it in pictures and then had a description, and it was just fantastic. So the green hat, creativity, and the possibilities were endless, and that's exactly what underpins my educational theory, is that there is absolutely no ceiling on learning. And the blue hat, managed thinking process, so all the others work. Now, the blue hat will work because they're working in groups. There's always bound to be someone who just stays the course, keeps on track, which I managed to do. I'm pretty sure I've written it down somewhere, but I've got a few notes here that I've got a few notes somewhere in my lesson plan here that to look at the groups, be aware of who's in the groups, and make sure that the groups are split up well. Teamwork and throughout my philosophy, the teamwork that underpins it is that the students will learn off each other. Now, I believe everyone can learn, but I believe that the students will work better if they're working off someone who is going to be wearing the blue hats and managing the thinking process and just staying the course, which is what's important. All right, so that's the end of part 2. I hope that you enjoyed that little tutorial there about. I will include that lesson plan so that you can have a closer look at it. That will be in my appendices, which I will put at the end of this assignment. I thought it was a great artifact. It worked really well as a lesson, so hopefully that has given some evidence for how my educational philosophy can work within the classroom. Thank you.